Now here to discuss the Credit Ombud 2015 annual report is Nicky Lala-Mohan. He's the newly appointed Credit Ombud. A very warm welcome to you and congratulations on your appointment.
Thank you so much, Gugu. Nice to be here. Thanks.
Maybe let's get into the nitty-gritties of the report, which has recently been published. But what is it telling us about the credit arena in South Africa?
It's telling us a couple of things, particularly if you last year we had a so-called credit amnesty, or rather the removal of adverse consumer information, which was one of our key focuses. And the other thing is the emolument attachment orders, the Garnishee orders. And those were like the two key things that we dealt with last year. And as a result of the amnesty, prior to that, we had numerous inquiries as to what is this about, how will my name be removed, etc. So our calls increased dramatically by 60%, but lots of inquiries, you know. And then the other issue was we deal with non-bank credit, and the abuses in terms of emolument attachment orders, the Garnishee orders, really took up a lot of our time and preoccupied us. And as you may know, that the Garnishee orders or the emolument attachment orders is currently there's a case, the University of Stellenbosch Law Clinic is challenging the constitutionality of the law and is representing a class action of 16 farm workers in the wine industry in Cape Town. So it's topical and it's going to be current and it's going to be further work for us in that regard. But generally those were the themes that we dealt with. We're glad to say that many of our disputes are resolved amicably by negotiation. We didn't have to do a ruling. A ruling is where, you know, the credit provider disagrees with us, and I, as the ombud, would then make a ruling that he'd have to abide by. So just that's the landscape we face at the moment.
I wanted to zone into the issue regarding Garnishee orders, as you alluded to earlier on. Certainly something that could perhaps set a precedent in the country if that case regarding the Stellenbosch University does go through in their favor.
Yes, most definitely. And look, we're not against the EAO. We just believe that it should be fairly applied. The law should be fairly applied. What is happening is that there's abuse there. What happens is people sign their rights away, and then attorneys and collection agents use it purely as a collection method. And they get paid first, because before you get your salary, they get their money. And many people face hardship. We get cases where people are left with 11 Rand in their account, earning about 8,000 Rand. It's mostly government workers, poor farm workers, you know, because of credit. So it will definitely change the landscape.
I don't know if the viewers saw my eyes pop out at that 11 Rand statement, but that just certainly highlights the fact that there needs to be some kind of consumer education. Are we finding that enough of that is also taking place?
I think this case has raised the level of awareness of this. That's work for us to do in terms of consumer education. But many of the credit grantors, you know, particularly I was in the banking sector previously, banks have agreed not to do Garnishee orders anymore, emolument attachment orders. You know, my predecessor, Mani van Skalkwyk, was part of a task team where he got other credit grantors to, you know, set some rules and policy in terms of how you will deal with Garnishee orders. And all we say is that before you issue a Garnishee order, check for affordability. Check for the number of Garnishee orders the person has. So yeah, I think that's going to be the flavor of the year going forward.
What about the role of these credit providers? And I say this in light of what we saw happening with ABLE, basically the collapse of that financial institution.
Yeah, you know, I think because of economic times and that credit providers want their money back, and then they hand it over to agents or collection agents. And then, you know, it depends what tactics they do. They have to collect, you know. And, you know, I was in court the last week, Thursday, hearing that matter. And one of the attorneys or the advocates arguing on behalf of one of the attorneys was saying that, you know, this is a process and you follow the law, etc. And the judge said, but, you know, I picked up that this is not an objective assessment, it's a subjective assessment, because you're chasing money. You can't be objective in the sense of when you're trying to get money from somebody. You want an end result to get the money, so whatever you do, it's subjective. Where you get him to sign the Garnishee order or whatever doesn't matter. It's subjective.
Exactly.
Yes.
Are we still concerned though about the rate of credit extension? And I say this because we've seen the interest rate staying fairly flat over the last couple of MPC meetings.
I think it's
inflation also, you know, providing some kind of relief, but we know, you know, consumers will continue to be under pressure.
You know, we're waiting for the National Credit Amendment Act to be passed. It's passed already, but the regulations, we believe it's probably today and an effective date. And that's going to change the landscape a bit, because you've got to do a proper affordability assessment. And if you don't, you're going to be charged with reckless lending. And I think the regulator is going to come down hard on those credit providers that do not do the checks and balances. And the reckless lending means that the loan that you gave is free, paid back. So that's going to change. So we're waiting for that to happen. So there's a lot of exciting things happening in the regulatory space. There's the National Credit Amendment Act. And for us, the Twin Peaks, the financial sector regulated role, you know, for us as for the first time, a credit agreement is regarded as a financial product, and those people become financial product suppliers, and they fall into the net of an ombud scheme. Right now, we're voluntary. You know, in a sense, it makes them mandatory to belong to our scheme. So we're very pleased with that, and we're supporting that all the way through. So
from a legislative environment, which is what I wanted to allude to earlier, we're on the right track and moving in the right place.
Most definitely, most definitely.
Looking at the year ahead, any particular highlights that we can expect?
No, I'm new in my role. One of the big things, we had the function last night, the annual report, is consumer outreach. We need to spread the word. Many people don't know of our office. There's 14 million credit active people. There's so many impaired records. And you know, what we're dealing with is probably just a fraction of what is out there. We can deal with more. We want to deal with more. We want to be the voice of the consumer in terms of their redress to credit affairs and credit information.
Thank you so much for your time today.